Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a rare book review. A lot of people have asked me to do book reviews, but in order to do book reviews, I have to read the books, and it takes time. Well, I read the books. I've read the books. They're sitting around, and I'm starting to unpack the books. So maybe we'll be able to do some more of them in the future. You know, books go in and out of print probably as quickly as CDs do, and so I hesitate to review books that people can't get, because at least with CDs, you can stream them, or there are many ways to get them. With books, well, sometimes they're available digitized, but sometimes they just aren't, and you've got to get them used, and it's like a whole different thing that I don't want to inflict on people. But there are some books that I think are really, really worth talking about, and this is one of them. Earl Wild's memoir, A Walk on the Wild Side. Now, this was originally published in a limited hardcover edition that was quite expensive and sold only through the website Ivory Classics, which is Michael Rowland Davis's Earl Wild, basically record label and website. There's also an Earl Wild website where you can get his discs. Thank God for Michael Davis, because he has kept Earl Wild's discography in print and alive and available, and one way or another, at least most of it, if not all of it, and this, which he worked on with Earl Wild. They lived together for some decades, and nobody knew him better. And this is one amazing book, I have to tell you. The original one was hardcover. It ran to like 900 pages. This has been re-edited, which frankly it needed to be, and I think the font's a little smaller, but in any case, it goes to about 700 and some odd pages, including the discography in the back, and it's as thorough as it needs to be. Now, as a writer, Earl Wild is not as great as he was as a pianist, and what could we expect? It's a very casual, chatty, relaxing, fun read. There are a couple typographical things they haven't found, and occasionally Wild is somewhat repetitious. He kind of repeats himself. There we go. See, I just did that myself, the same way that Earl Wild does. He repeats himself somewhat and goes on about some things, but he is as gossipy and chatty and uninhibited a writer as he was a pianist, unquestionably. And the stories that you find in here. Earl Wild was everywhere. He was absolutely everywhere. He was the consummate musician and music industry professional, in addition to being an absolutely amazing pianist. And he has some wonderful observations about piano playing and piano technique and what everyone else is doing wrong, and why he doesn't like Al Brendel and Isaac Stern, who he thought was sort of like an evil being. And whether what he thought or what he saw or what he knew is all true, who knows? But he calls it like he heard it, and like he saw it, and like he experienced it. The cool thing about Earl Wild for me is that he had total catholicity of taste. He was an amazing improviser. He was an incredible pianist in just about any style he chose to do. He became a Gershwin sort of avatar, but that wasn't what he did. That wasn't his destiny or his style. That happened fortuitously. His first great love, I think his biggest love, or let's put it that way, was Rachmaninoff, whose music he performed magnificently. He was also a composer, a serious composer of keyboard music. His transcriptions are incredible. Absolutely incredible. Rachmaninoff's song transcriptions are gorgeous. He did so much with so much repertoire. He enjoyed unusual repertoire. He took an early interest for that reason in Marc-André Hamelin, when he lists, new pianists who look like they may actually be real pianists, as he puts it. He was playing the piano since he was 5 years old. It's all he ever wanted to do. He practiced for hours daily. I think perhaps the insight that I think that I find most valuable for me coming out of this tome, aside from the sheer fun I get in reading it, because it just is a blast to read, is the idea that there is no inherent disparity between virtuosity and emotional expression, that's a myth, that's something that people dream up to be able to typecast pianists, because Wild was typecast as a technician who was not particularly expressive or emotional. He played flashy, trashy Liszt and virtuoso romantic things. But that's absolutely not true. It's what I've often said about Heifetz, that people mistake the ease of with which he surmounted technical difficulties with a lack of emotional expression. And that comes, to my mind, simply from an inability to listen. It really does. I believe that. I think people who say that are just being facile. And Wilde points out very, very correctly that for so many people, the visual aspect of music is more important than the musical aspect of music. We can also talk about that when it comes to Yuja Wang and the way she dressed and things like that. The idea that the showmanship, the pianist with the hands that go piling down from on high, and the agonizing appeal to the heavens when they're performing and they're sweating and groping and gasping and all of that nonsense. He was a very calm player. He believed always in keeping the fingers on the keyboard and in not wasting energy in bodily movement because it takes time when you do that, and that makes it harder to play things quickly, to get from one note to the other. He had a very, very carefully worked out technique that worked for him, and I think he's 100% correct. People don't use their ears. They would rather see some pianist moaning and heaving and dripping and oozing all over the keyboard and the piano than in actually listening to the tone that they produce and to the shape of the phrase and to the overall conception of the work. And you understand when you read this book that he cared deeply about all of that stuff. And he cared deeply about all that stuff in music that was not usually credited with having those higher qualities. The late Romantic virtuoso piano repertoire. In that respect, he's very similar to another artist who I think also made the point, Maria Callas. Because Maria Callas, remember, was going to make the point that there is just as much depth and artistry and emotion in music that had been relegated to the canary brand of sopranos, the bel canto Italian repertoire, which everybody thought was kind of second-rate and trashy and all that. But she was out to prove that you make your point through the singing, through the voice. Even if you might think the music is terribly simplistic or not as sophisticated as something that came later, the emotion is there, the expression is there. It's up to the artist to turn it into art, to reveal the art, let's put it that way, because the art's already there. And Wilde makes that point pretty consistently throughout the book. And I think it's a very, very important one and a strong one, because he encourages all of us to do what I think we need to do, which is listen, actually listen. I mean, if you listen to Earl Wilde play Liszt's Second Hungarian Rhapsody, for example, I mean, a piece that a lot of people toss off, it doesn't sound like anybody else, first of all. And second of all, you'll hear more music, more interest, more accent, more phrasing, more wonderfulness than you do in just about any other performance of the work. Why? Because he treats it as great music, which it is. I mean, there's no such thing as, playing a piece as greater than it really is. If you reveal its greatness, then its greatness is there. And that was Wilde's gift. It really was. In addition to the fact that, let me just say, he was a TV pianist. He was an orchestral pianist. He grew up in Pittsburgh. He was the pianist in the Pittsburgh Symphony when Reiner was there. He played in the NBC Symphony Orchestra under Toscanini. I mean, he knew everybody. He played popular music on television shows. He was the sort of studio pianist for ABC and for NBC, and when the NBC Symphony was there, then he went to ABC. He taught at Juilliard and Manhattan School and other universities and Ohio State and all over the place. And he gives us his opinions about teaching and academic politics and piano competitions and the TV universe and classical music culture. And he met everybody and knew everyone and has no hesitation telling us what he thought about all of them. I mean, so there are real artistic insights and professional insights and just tons and tons and tons of really chatty and sometimes catty gossip. And you can't ask for more. And this is something that will take a lot of time to read. It's juicy. It's juicy. It's a healthy, generous chunk of musical mayhem, musical memoir mayhem, let's call it. So there you have it. It's Earl Wild's A Walk on the Wild Side, a memoir. It's published by Earl Wild, Earl Wild's own organization, by Michael Davis, who worked with him on it. And in addition, it's available on Kindle, and now it's available as a paperback. And if you want to read musical biographies and you really want to know what there is to know about musical biographies from people who are really in it, who are around to report on every possible thing, this is definitely one to get. There's no question about it. It's one of those extraordinary stories. And I just think it's essential reading. It really is for classical music fans and pianophiles and people who are interested in the 20th century classical music culture in America, to an extent in Europe, but mostly in America. And you're going to love it. You're really going to love it. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.